And we're going to start this section by configuring the VS Code editor to fit our needs a little bit better. And so that will then make coding a lot easier in the rest of the course. And once more, here on my desktop, I already have the starter files for this section. So go ahead and get yours from the GitHub repository as well, even though in this lecture we're not yet gonna need them really. But let's still open VS Code, because of course we're gonna need a VS Code window if we want to configure it. All right, now here on my desktop, of course I choose the developer skills folder, which is the folder for this section. And once again, we have an HTML file, which already has the script linked to it. And then here's also the script file, which has basically nothing. All I put here to get started is activating the strict mode. Because remember that from now on, we should use strict mode in all of the scripts. And so I left it here already, so we don't forget it. But anyway, let's now start configuring VS Code. And we will start with a tool called Prettier. And Prettier is an opinionated code formatter, which means that it makes assumptions about how good code should look like. And so if we install it and use it, then this will make sure that your code is nicely formatted and also that it will look exactly the same as my code looks in the video. So that's going to make it easier for you to take this course. And also, of course, for you to write your own code in the future. So this tool is available as a VS Code extension. So let's click this extension button here. And then here all you have to do is to search Prettier. And it's going to be this first one. And I, of course, already have it installed. I just need to enable it. So I click here on enable. But you will have to install it and then probably reload VS Code. So I enable it. And so now it is working. So install it on your end and reload the browser and then come back here. Okay, so let's close the sidebar here again. And so installing this plugin was the first step. The second step is to now actually define Prettier as the default formatter of our code. So let's go here to Preferences, Settings, which should look something like this. And then here in the search bar, let's search for default formatter. So that's this one here you're looking for. And you see we have this huge list of available formatters. But the one that we are looking for is this esbnp.prettier VS Code. So this one should be here in case you successfully installed Prettier before. And so let's just click this here, and then we should be good to go. We just need to make sure that the format on save setting is also correctly set. So format on save. And we did this actually already at the beginning of the course. But in case you skipped that video for some reason, then just make sure that you actually tick this box here. All right. And so with that, Prettier should now actually be working. So let's just declare a variable down here and give it a couple of lines of space. And then simply x equal to something, and then give it a save. And you see that Prettier automatically did some changes to our code. So first of all, it removed all these blank lines that we had here. And it also transformed these single quotes into double quotes. Finally, it also added an empty line of code here at the end. Okay, so these may seem like small changes, but all of them added up throughout all the code can actually make a big difference. And again, Prettier is an opinionated code formatter. So opinionated means that they have a strong opinion, and then basically when we use the tool, we have to accept that opinion. And many people don't like that, but actually I believe it's a good thing. It makes it so that I don't have to take a decision on how the code should look like. For example, some people prefer to write the if-else statement without a space here, and other people like to have a space here. And let's just write something here. And so now, no matter what we do, Prettier will take that formatting decision away from us. So if I save this now, you see that it automatically inserted that space here, even if I don't like it. So if I remove it and save it again, it will be back. All right, but this makes it easier to make your code consistent and to make your code also consistent with other people's code. And in this case, my code that you can see here in the video. And so if we both use this tool, our code will look the same. Now, there are some things that we can configure. And for example, one thing that I don't like is the double quotes. I prefer to use the single quotes. But right now, Prettier will transform every single quotes to double quotes. So I add single quotes, give it a save, and you see now they turned to double quotes. And so some things we can actually configure in Prettier. So let me show that to you. So just Google Prettier, and probably the first option here will be this tool. So here we can go to Docs, and then probably here. So here we can do options. So configuring Prettier and then options. And probably the web page looks a bit different by the time you're watching the video, but just search for the options here. So let's take a look at some of the things that we can change. For example, the width of one line, or if Prettier should use tabs or spaces here, or if it should add semicolons or not. But what I'm interested here is the quotes. And so using this option, we can tell Prettier to use single quotes instead of double quotes. And so that's what I want. Now, how do we actually configure Prettier? Well, there are multiple ways, but the easiest one is to create a configuration file in the current project folder. So let's go back to the sidebar here. Then we create a new file, and this one is going to be called .prettier and then RC. Okay, and now here we basically write this object, and it's not really an object because this is not JavaScript code. And so now we write single quote. And actually VS Code already gives us this option here. And then as I hit enter, actually we get this preset value. But I actually want to change it to true. Okay? And if I now give this one a save, and then also save this, then you see that it automatically changed my double quotes back to single quotes. Great. Now, another thing that Prettier does by default is something in arrow functions. So let me show that as well. And closing the sidebar here. So const, let's create a calc_h function again. Then we say birth year, and then we want to return 2037 minus the birth year. So just like we've been using. But now watch what happens when I give it a save. So you see that Prettier actually wrapped this single parameter here in parentheses. However, I actually don't like this. So when there's just one parameter, I like to see it without the parentheses. And so that's another thing that we can configure here. And so that one's called arrow parents. And so now we can choose between always and, well, some other options. So let's just search that here with Command F, arrow parents. So we can choose between always and avoid. And so I want avoid here. Okay? And so you can take a look at this entire list here if you want. And then you can change your own configuration to match your preferred coding style. Okay? And probably by now you don't have yet really a coding style, but it's good to know that you can change stuff that you don't like or that you don't want to see. So for me, this is the two things that I always change, and as necessary, I keep adding more stuff from time to time. So let's close it, give it a save to see if this change is now reflected here. And yeah, so as I saved it again, the parentheses here were gone. And remember that we enabled format on save. And so that's why all these formattings take effect whenever we save a file. All right. Now, if for some reason you cannot make this work, then don't worry. You can still progress in the course without having Prettier working. That's because this tool does, of course, not influence how the code itself works. It's just a visual tool that only changes how the code looks. Anyway, this was already a big step on making coding a little bit easier for us. But now I want to show you something else, which is to basically automate something very boring that we're doing all the time. And that is writing console.log. So whenever we want to log something, we have to write all of this console.log and do all this work. But in VS Code, we can configure snippets which can take that work away from us. So let me show you how. So we go here in the menu into this preferences folder or submenu, and then here we can define user snippets. So click on that, and then you can open one of these files, but the best thing to do is to just create a new global snippets file. So click that and then just give it a name, and it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to call it Jonas here. And so here we can define a couple of snippets. And remember that the snippet that we want to define is simply one that automatically writes console.log for us. And actually there's already an example snippet down here, which basically does just that. So it's this here. And so let's just uncomment all of this. So again with command /. And so this here is the name of the snippet. Then here we say that it works in JavaScript and in TypeScript. This is the command that will basically trigger the snippet. And here I like to use CL. So whenever we write CL in the code, it will then expand that to console.log. Then here is the code that will actually be written. And here, get rid of this second line. And then here, also get rid of all of this. Because I found that this is the best way to make this work. And it's not really important that you understand how this works. This is just a recipe that I want you to follow here, just to make our lives coding a little bit easier. So then give it a save. And once you head back to your script, and now write CL, which remember is this prefix, but you could have chosen anything else. But in my case, whenever I write now CL and then hit enter, it will give me console.log. And then all I need to do is to go back and then write whatever I want to log here. Now here we can also define this $1, which is the way it was before, and then this will place the cursor between the parentheses. But then I found that when you do that, the autocomplete in VS Code does no longer work. And so that's why I don't use that. So you see now the cursor is here, but then autocomplete does not work. And in this case, you can't really see that. But if this variable name was a little bit longer, XYZ ABC, and then XYZ, so you see that the autocompletion is not working. I would have to go down and go up again, and only then it would work. Okay, and so let's just remove that and call it a day. Okay, so from now on, I will no longer manually type console.log. I will always just do this. Okay, and now to finish, let's just go maybe a little bit over my extensions that I have here, just to show you what I use. So let's remove that search text there. And so these first two are about HTML development, and I'm going to show them to you in the next section. Then these don't really matter. ESLint is a tool that we're going to use later. Image preview is also good for HTML. Then Monokai Pro is the theme that I'm using, remember. Then of course Prettier. Then I have settings sync, which is very useful to synchronize settings between different VS Code installations. For example, if you have multiple computers or multiple accounts on your computer. And finally, one that I use all the time is to do highlight. So this allows me to highlight parts of a text. So for example, I can do something like this. So when I write bug in a comment, for example, then it gives me this nice red highlight. Or fix me is another one. So let me show you my settings here that will show how I do that. So that is preferences and settings. And then we need to go here into this icon. And again, by the time you're watching this, this might have changed. But what matters is that you need to open the settings in a JSON format. And so this shows all the settings that I have. And so here is how I defined these, these colored tags. So you need to install the to-do highlight extension, and then in your settings, you just write this kind of code to define different colored tags for different texts. Okay, so very useful one again. Yeah, I think that's enough for this video. This one was not really about coding or anything. It's just to set us up for the rest of the course, and also so that you start getting a feel for a little bit of the tooling that we have in the JavaScript ecosystem. All right, and actually in the next lecture, we will continue doing that. So I see you there in a second.